we had a plan, of course, to focus entirely on celebrating Earth Day today. And then the events of Monday afternoon took place, not to mention many others, but that one really got our attention. And I started to think that there wasn't a huge difference between the exploration that I was already working on into our true nature as it applies to our relationship with the earth, and our true nature as it applies to our relationships with one another. Because our true nature is one thing, and we embody it and express it to different degrees and in different ways in different arenas, but it's one thing. It's one thing. So rather than send out an emergency bulletin that we're changing all our plans, we expanded our plans. We expanded our plans, and we still had a beautiful earth meditation this morning. We shifted some of the songs that we chose to share today to be more in line with where I believe we've been arriving as a community, as a global community. And we still have a plan to go for a nature walk this afternoon. And yet, what I had to share with you did expand considerably as I contemplated, like everyone else, the events unfolding beginning Monday afternoon. There are two classes that we just began last week. One is on Tuesday nights and one is on Thursday nights. The Tuesday night class is an introduction to this teaching and focuses a great deal on the work of Ernest Holmes and both his contemporaries and our contemporaries. And it's called The New Foundations of the Science of Mind and Spirit. And the other one on Thursday is for people who've taken a first class, and it's focusing entirely on the work of Thomas Troward, who was around at the turn of the last century, if you can believe that we're alive long enough to be talking about such things. And both of those classes, both of the reading assignments, all of the material, of course, because it's about universal truth, related a lot to these events. So in both of those classes, we had discussions about what does this mean to us? Because we don't just sit here in our little, cocoon, our glass house, our cave on a mountaintop or whatever, and contemplate these things for our own edification. We recognize that we're one. And in that recognition, we evolve and we grow, and the choices that we make shift. They have to. Our awareness, our awakening calls us to that. So there were a couple of things. Thomas Troward, back in 1911, proposed that our true nature cannot act against itself. And Greg Braden, as recently as 2012, found scientific evidence, or rather gathered that others have discovered, that suggests our true nature is not to be at war with one another. Ernest Holmes, back in 1938, another tumultuous period in human history, said, we have learned enough from suffering. And again, Thomas Troward in 1911 proposed that what we're really looking for is a way to create for ourselves that doesn't give other people any less of the same opportunity. Finally, Ernest Holmes, again in 1938, offers some simple guidelines as to how to identify each of us individually what is right and wrong for us. I included the two Holmes quotes in your program with a place to take notes, but it's something that you can take home and think about. So Thomas Troward, just to expound on that first one, said that the first principle of the creative process is harmony. It cannot be made to operate against itself. It cannot be agonizing itself from different centers. There must be a point of simultaneous order at every point. So he's saying that there is something about all of life that when it is in its natural state or order is harmonious. Expounding on what Greg Braden shares, this is from Oh, which book is it? In the end, you gave it to me. Oh, darn. Deep Truth, thank you. I have most of them. War may be a habit rather than an ongoing way of life. That actually there is a huge amount of evidence from many different recent scientific experiments, archaeological digs, something much deeper than that, which was to tap the ice core and be able to get about 450,000 years worth of history in all kinds of things that they determined from the evidence of every layer throughout all time. Has changed the way we see our history, but also through archaeological digs. And the bottom line for us who don't delve into those things too deeply is that there's plenty of evidence of many times on this planet that we as a people have lived without walls, without weapons, without any evidence of having them or using them upon one another, without any lack of resources. And there's a connection between resources and walls. What we have, though, is a history that tells us this thing that we desire, to live peacefully now, for there to be more than enough for everyone, is a possibility. Because it's happened before, more than once. This habit of warfare is only, get that word only, about 5,000 or 10,000 years old. So maybe it's going to take a little while to break it. But hey, if it's a habit and it's not our true nature, and all we have to do is remember our true nature, there's a possibility that we can transform it. Just like that. The same way that we transform any other habit. Ernest Holmes wrote, and this one is one of the two things that's in your program. The world has learned all it should through suffering. The world is beginning to realize that it has learned all it should from suffering and pain. Surely there can be no intelligence in the universe that wishes man to be sick, suffer pain, be unhappy, and end in oblivion. Surely, if God or universal intelligence is imbued with goodness, then it should not ordain that man should ultimately be other than a perfect expression of life. And Greg Braden shares more evidence in the same book that our periods of warring seem to match times when we're experiencing extreme conditions in our environment, as well as what ensues as a result of those periods. In simplest terms, because I always say we are up here not to tell anyone what to do, not to interpret and suggest what you do about anything, but to encourage each one of us to think a little bit more. So perhaps there are conditions, whatever they may be, let's just bring this back out of that into a general field. There may be conditions in our lives which cause us to build walls and to think that we need weapons, to think that there's not enough, and that we must guard and protect and defend, and maybe go get and hide out, and maybe keep it from someone else, and share a little less, and take care of ourselves a little more. And perhaps that perception and the attendant behavior gives rise to the very thing that we're afraid of. So maybe we can step back and say, in those times when we feel most challenged, in those times when our lives, for whatever reason they may be, feel a little bit more extreme, that we remember to return to an idea of our true nature. Whatever your mantra might be, I started singing one of those Daniel Nahmod songs this morning. There is more than enough in a universe that you created. More than enough on a planet of sacred design. Whatever it is, if you can get a happy song to come to your mind or a mantra, or if you can just stop and breathe and say, wait a minute, I know it looks like there isn't enough of something. I know that it looks like I need to defend myself. I know that it looks like I need to protect myself. Maybe, just maybe, another way will come to mind if we just stop and somehow return to our true nature. Another word from Thomas Troward is that what we are seeking to discover is how to arrange things in such an order as to set in motion a chain of causation that will harmonize our own conditions without antagonizing the exercise of like power in others. What does that mean in plain English? What that means is, yeah, we can come here and we can go to classes and workshops and read books and do all kinds of neat things, sayings and postures and dances and whatever to manifest and to create our own reality. And by the same token, we can remember that there's something within us that knows how to do this, that's already provided a way that doesn't take away from anyone else. That's really what I wanted to arrive at. Ernest Holmes, this other thing that's in your program, the criterion for any man as to what is right or wrong for him is not to be found in some other man's judgment. The criterion is, does the thing I wish to do express more life, more happiness, more peace for myself, and at the same time harm no one? If it does, it is right. It is not selfish. But if it is done at the expense of anyone, then in such degree are we making wrong use of the law. When we talk about law around here, we're not talking about the kind that involves police officers. We're not talking even about the laws of any particular church or religion or order or anything like that that says thou shalt do this or thou shalt not do that. None of this is what we're talking about. And yet, in a way it is. And I'll tell you why it is. Because it used to be, as I know I said last week, that a select group of people studied all of this stuff and then told us what it meant. And then said, all you need to know is always do this and never do that. Always eat this and never eat that. And always be here and never go there. But we couldn't stay with that. Because we're thinking people. We're evolving people. We all have equal access to revelation. We all have equal access to our own evolution. And we all have personal responsibility for it. Nobody else can really grow for me or think for me. I can't do that for you. I happen to be, for some reason, wired to be inspired, to put things together and get up here and share them. And in all of our classes and groups, we're constantly encouraging other people to do the same thing. Because this is about all of us. So when we talk about laws around here, we're really talking about things that are demonstrable. A couple of good examples in the Tuesday night class. One is the simple idea that when you mix two colors together, you will get the same result as another person in this room or halfway across the globe. There is a principle that says when you add this color to that color, you get this color. Now it varies as the original components do. Mathematics would be another one. There are principles of mathematics which work equally for everyone. They're available to everyone. All you have to do is study it, and then you know it, and then you embody it, and then it's what you express. And as Ernest Holmes, our founder, would say, it becomes law unto you. All that means is that it becomes the truth of your experience to the degree that you understand it. Another fun one is electricity. You know, if you don't understand it, you should probably hire someone who does, or get someone who does, to play with it for you. If your level of understanding is switches and breakers and calling FP&L, keep it that way. Unless you have a strong desire to understand more and you go learn about it. But the principles of how electricity work are available to everyone. And as you understand them, you can utilize the power that they provide in greater and greater and greater ways. I remember giving a talk in Bellingham, Washington about 2 years ago, and the other thing that I talked about was water. If you understand how water works, right, you can do things with it that other people who don't understand cannot do. But if you don't understand, you might call a plumber or an engineer who specializes in that to help you make sure that water is moving around in your household, for example, in ways that you would prefer that it do and not that it doesn't, right? So that's all we're talking about with laws. Gravity. Isn't it great that there are people who wanted to discover about gravity and the laws, all of the different laws, aerodynamics and so on, that are involved in flight, in mechanical flight? We feel pretty confident about that. But you wouldn't want me figuring that all out and designing the plane and then saying, hop in. You know, I trust that someone who has had that curiosity is part of a team of people who share that curiosity, who have found out how those laws operate. And they've made it possible for me to fly. So we're all here together. There are all kinds of laws. They're available to everyone. We don't have to interpret them for each other any longer. And by the same token, sometimes we say, you know what, that's really not my bag. So I would really rather have you, because you're so excited about it, learn more about that thing and tell me about it, because I do want to know. Or I want to make sure that my plumbing or my electricity or the colors of paint on my walls or the numbers in my bank account work out. Great. So we're all here with different curiosities, lots of laws available to all. And one of the things about this teaching is that to the degree we truly understand something and know it, it becomes who we are. It becomes what we express. It becomes our life. So that's how it goes with laws. So getting back to our true nature. When I first started writing this whole piece, it came out completely differently, of course. And it started with this simple idea: how can you meditate at a time like this? How can you meditate at a time like this? Well, guess what? We know this now. If I meditate, if I be still and know, if I take a walk by the river, if I do whatever it is that allows me to remember my true nature, then I'm going to be able to see it in you. If I do that, I'm going to be able to see it in everyone and everything. That doesn't mean that any one of us just looks out the door and says, oh, it's all perfect, let's go get lunch. Oh, no. It allows us to feel that connection with one another. And then from somewhere inside of ourselves, probably be inspired, even compelled to do something as a result of that connection, as a result of recognizing our true nature. That's what it means. Some people come here just to get their checkbooks handled, just to get beyond their poverty consciousness. And Wing says, find something in the world that needs fixing and make it your job every day. And she said, for me, I wanted to make sure that everybody on this planet recognizes that they can prosper. And think about it. If there's something in your heart you'd like to do to help heal the world and change the world, and you would if you could, but you can't, so you won't, because why? Because perhaps you don't have the time or the funding. Might that be a good reason to go ahead and study prosperity principles so that's no longer an issue for you, so you have more to give? Again, it's just a set of laws, a set of principles available to everyone. And when you get it, when you know it, when you embody it, and you express it, it becomes the truth of your experience. When we go out in the world, we have so much to share. One other thing that I have shared, and I did this when we were all moving through the Sandy Hook incident not very long ago, is to point out, and I put it in our newsletter. If any of you get our newsletter, you can still go there and click on this link. Something from Greg Braden again, called The Gift of the Blessing. To be really complete with witnessing something that throws us off center and makes it really hard to remember our true nature. We can do this process. It's just one idea. We can look at those who experience this suffering and bless them. And what does that mean? That doesn't mean condone. That means I see and I acknowledge that this is happening. I give it my full appreciation and attention and sit with it. Then we look at those who, for whatever reasons we may or may not ever know, took part in creating that suffering. And what do? We bless them, not to condone their acts, but to say, I am present for a moment, knowing the true nature of everyone involved, and that this is not an act of life. This is not an act of affirming life. This is not an act of creation. But somewhere in that person or those people, it's still there. What if I go out in my world and I sing it louder, I say it louder, I embody it more often, I don't hide it, I share it? Is there a possibility that more will awaken and not need to build walls or weapons or use them? We move on and we say, I bless myself in this moment, in the witnessing. I don't know about you, but I've had some tearful moments this week. Don't push them down. Repression is what begins this cycle of something seeking an outlet that has not been acknowledged and not dealt with. Do you know that all dis-ease originates from unhealed grief? So if we're going to break these cycles of perpetration, we need to heal. Can we avail ourselves of our own healing? Can we make sure that that's available to everyone else? Can we be part of this awakening such that all can remember their true nature? Because our true nature is peace. Our true nature is plenty. Our true nature is harmony. It's available. In our DNA, somewhere in there, we have the ancient ancestral memory of being those people who lived in peace and plenty on this planet. And like every potential, every genetic, every spiritual, every personal, every philosophical, every emotional, every physical potential, it needs only a trigger. Some sort of a trigger for it to be expressed. Perhaps that trigger is simply to be still and know. Perhaps that trigger is just to sit and remember our true nature. The evidence is there. The potential is there. We've done it before. And I think we can do it again.